The White House is not only facing domestic issues like the economy this week. Indeed, this afternoon, Secretary of State John Kerry spoke to reporters about the situation in Syria. And at the White House briefing, Press Secretary Jay Carney fielded questions about a possible thawing of the U.S. relationship with Iran. And our Kristen Welker was at that very briefing, and she joins us now. Good afternoon, Kristen. What did Jay Carney say when he was pressed on the topic of U.S.-Iran relations?
Well, Martin, I think the big headline is that Carney said that President Obama would be open to meeting with Iran's president, Hassan Rouhani, next week at the UN General Assembly. And those comments come after Rouhani granted an exclusive interview to NBC's Ann Curry and told her that he has no plans to develop nuclear weapons. Now, Carney has called that rhetoric positive, but he says that actions are more important than words. The White House would like to see concrete steps taken by Iran, proving that they are getting rid of their nuclear weapons program. But I can say that Carney also pointed to some actual steps that Iran has taken that seem to suggest that they are, this new leader wants to be seen as more moderate. He just released 11 political prisoners, but Carney making the point that that still isn't the same as taking steps to get rid of his nuclear weapons program. Now, we should say that Israel is just responding to this interview, saying that this is the same old Iran. They're not buying it. That is in part because Rouhani called the Israeli government a usurper government. And so there's a lot of skepticism about whether or not this new leader is better at PR or whether he actually intends to open up some diplomatic opportunities. Martin.
Kristen Welker at the White House. Thank you, Kristen. And
Thanks.
If you were one of those who thought it was a strange marriage when former Democratic Congressman Dennis Kucinich joined Fox News, then you were probably slightly flabbergasted if you turned on that same network last night.
Have you spoken to President Obama?
Never.
Have you ever spoken to him?
Never.
Are you interested in speaking to our president?
That depends on the content. It's not a chat.
If you wanted to send him a message right now, what would you say to him?
Listen to your people. Follow the common sense of your people.
In the nearly one-hour interview taped on Tuesday, President Assad stuck to his story that it was the rebels and not his administration that used chemical weapons. And even he had the audacity to claim not only that he doesn't trust the United States, but that he doesn't think the United States should trust him.
President Obama then can trust you to follow through.
I don't think that President Obama should trust me first. The Syrian people should trust me, not President Obama.
For more, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Joel Rubin, who's Director of Policy and Government Affairs for the Ploughshares Fund. Joel, we'll get to the Assad interview in a minute, but Secretary Kerry just spoke about an hour ago about the UN report as further evidence that Assad used chemical weapons. Just take a listen to this.
Sarin was used, sarin killed. The world can decide whether it was used by the regime which has used chemical weapons before, the regime which had the rockets and the weapons, or whether the opposition secretly went unnoticed into territory they don't control to fire rockets they don't have, containing sarin that they don't possess, to kill their own people, and that without even being noticed, they just dissembled it all and packed up and got out of the center of Damascus, controlled by Assad. Please.
Doesn't the Secretary of State's reaction cast that somewhat jocular and folksy interview with Assad in its correct context, that this is the man who used those weapons?
That's right, Martin. That interview was shameful. The Secretary has clearly laid out what the international community affirms through the United Nations. It's clear that gas was used. It's clear that the mechanism for using that gas could only have been done by Assad. And really, there's no debate. But we do have to remember that this is what it looks like when Syria, when a regime that's used to lying and murdering its own people, is forced into making a deal and turning over the weapons that only a week ago it denied ever having.
Right, but when it comes to trying to get some kind of diplomatic resolution, how is that possible when you have two parties, neither of whom trust each other?
It's very complicated, but one doesn't do diplomacy with one's friends. One does it with one's enemies and adversaries. And in the American security world and in our country's interest, it's key to get rid of these chemical weapons, to deter Assad from ever using them again. And even the fact that there's a deal now between the U.S. and Russia, that's creating a deterrence. Assad does not have space to use these right now. Now the key questions are, what will Assad do going forward? Will he comply? And how will we ensure that he does?
Well, many people have suggested that the resolution to this would be for Assad to stand down. And he was asked about the possibility of a Syria without him in power. Take a listen.
Is there anyone else who could be president of Syria?
Of course, anyone who wants to be now, he can be.
So you're not the only person who could preside over Syria?
No, I won't be the only, I won't be the only person.
Is there any possibility that he means that he would willingly step down and hand over the power to somebody else?
This has been a topic that he's floated for years. He's talked about reform. But nonetheless, right now the U.S. is engaged in a very serious diplomatic process with Russia, and even talking about engaging Iran. Many leaders around the region are embarrassed by Assad, those who support him, and getting him out of the way, and perhaps next year through a process that appears to be supporting what Syria wants through an election. That may be a way, but again, it's not easy to tell how this is going to play out.
One of the other things that Assad did in that interview was he talked up the extremist elements in the opposition to his government. And there's an issue here, isn't there, for the United States, because should we not be profoundly worried that huge and hardware arsenal, whatever you want to call it, it may end up in the hands of some extremists, some terrorist organizations who are at war with Assad?
We really should be concerned about that, and that's why you've seen such trepidation by the Obama administration when supporting the Free Syrian Army and the opposition. There are extremist groups there. The CIA, who is right now providing assistance, is doing thorough vetting of it. It's not 100% fail-safe, and it is very difficult then to verify with certainty that the weapons are staying in the right hands.
Joel Rubin, thank you so much for joining us, Joel.
My pleasure.